Good morning, presenters. I gave you all video privileges, speaking privileges, and I'm sharing the slides.
Welcome all of you to this Global Genes webinar on using successful online fundraising strategies. I'm Daniel Levine, principal of Levidia Group, and it's my pleasure to be moderating today's panel with Molly Lindquist, founder and CEO of Consano, social media director of the Cure Jam Foundation, and Bill Strong, founder of the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation. These come with a successful use of social media to raise money for rare disease causes, and they've generously offered to share what they've learned from their experiences. Thank you all for joining us. I'd like to thank today's sponsors, Zoma, Shire, Genzyme, and Lexion for their support of today's webinar, and the staff of Global Genes and Katie Mastro for her great work in putting together and coordinating today's program. I'm going to be talking about three types of online fundraising: the use of crowdfunding, contest, and retail. We're going to talk about best practices for social media and building awareness and identity for your cause, and how to build rather than burn out your supporters. This webinar is meant to be interactive. I encourage people watching this live to your screens to instant message questions for the panel as we go, and I'll do my best to work these questions into our conversation. I'm also going to try to have some time at the end of the questions for the end of the presentation for questions from the audience. But let's begin with Molly Lindquist, founder and CEO of Consano. How are you today, Molly?
I'm good, Daniel. How are you?
Great. So why don't you begin by just telling us what exactly Consano is?
Consano is a 501c3 nonprofit platform specifically for medical research projects. So researchers can list a project on the site in a variety of health categories and then really kind of solicit the public or the crowd of their supporters, so to speak, to directly donate their project. And, most crowdfunding sites have some sort of perk. The perk on Consano is an ongoing connection with these researchers when typically that's unavailable unless you're donating large sums of money.
So walk me through, how does this work? How do I go about identifying, what cause, how if I am a researcher, how I connect with Consano?
Yeah, so, really from the get-go, when we were thinking about crowdfunding for this particular endeavor in terms of medical research, we knew that having a very thorough and rigorous vetting process to ensure that every researcher listed on the site was going to be essential. And, typically with crowdfunding, anyone can list a project, and that's fine if you're raising money for a CD or a movie, but in the case of research, there's a lot of hope that really rides on the research and the improvements to patient care that it can provide. So what we did is we set up a vetting process by working with the academic institutions to ensure the legitimacy, the feasibility, and the potential improvements of patient care by the research going on at their institution. So they help us source these innovative projects, which then go through our own scientific advisory board as a secondary check. Once the project is approved, it's listed on the site, and you see a shot of the homepage right there. And the intent is to be very simple. You go on as a donor, and often you're driven to the site by the researcher. I mean, as many people who are listening, I'm sure, are intimately aware of, we all have someone who plays an integral role in our own health journey or that of our loved ones. And so often the researchers who list the project are spreading the word to their patients, to their own family and friends even. So your website, you click on the Browse Projects, you have a health category that matters to you, and you read the project. They're all written in, we call it layman's terms. And, for me, I'm typically the first check. I don't have a PhD, and so often we'll get projects where I'm like, I don't understand the first 8 words of this sentence. This probably isn't going to be understandable to the public. But the idea is really to make medical research accessible, especially if it's not a patient donating, if it's a family or a friend who's not as intimately aware of, the scientific terminology. So you donate, you become, we call it part of the researcher's virtual lab, and then you receive quarterly updates and ongoing status, really, of what's going on with that project from the researcher. Or just, yeah.
You're not a PhD. You come to this as a patient, like many of the people who are involved in raising funds for this. How did you create Consano?
So, Daniel, in 2011, I was just gearing up for my 33rd birthday. I found a lump in my breast and kind of fast-tracked into, a biopsy, mammogram, et cetera, and I was told I had cancer. So I, went through my bilateral mastectomy and chemo and really came out most, bothered by the fact that now my two daughters, who, were now had a much higher risk of developing this themselves, would have to deal with this. And so I thought, how can I help as a non-scientist, and really supporting medical research seemed the only plausible way for me to, help create this world where my girls wouldn't have to worry about it. So that was kind of the impetus for starting Consano. And again, I'm sure many people listening, you go through a personal experience like that, and you kind of pull from it the things that either you were really grateful for. For me, I was very grateful to have insurance, to have a really wonderful support network who can never pay back. So I figured the next best thing would be to pay it forward and try to help others, going through similar health issues. And then, this started with cancer, but as I started talking to other patients and families, unfortunately, we're all touched somehow, and so we saw that this could be a very useful tool, particularly for more underfunded research categories. Breast cancer, ironically, even though that's, what I faced, is one of the more well-funded health categories, as I'm sure everyone knows. Everyone's very familiar with the pink ribbon, so I figured if I could help create a platform where other health issues could, kind of leverage that sort of awareness, then, really we all win.
So a lot of the sites that are used for a platform for crowdfunding are obviously businesses, and as such, they take a percentage of what they raise to their operations. Consano doesn't do this. Why is that, and how do you fund your operations?
Yeah, that was a really conscious decision as we created the framework for the organization, mostly because it was created out of a desire by myself for transparency. So I wanted to know, what percentage of my money was going to research or support services or, organizational overhead. And certainly it costs money to run an organization, and all those pieces are very important. But the way that we've set up Consano is we call it the tip model, where you go to the site, you donate to your project, all of that, less a PayPal fee, which I haven't figured out how to get around yet, goes to that research project, and then donors can leave an optional tip for Consano. And what we found is that approximately 50% of people leave us a little tip. So that funds our day-to-day organizations, and then, we do a lot of the same sort of fundraising as other 501c3s through corporate partnerships and, writing grants. But for me, I want people to want to support Consano, but I also want them to know what they're supporting. And so keeping that transparent was very important to me.
So Consano is by no means alone in raising money for disease research. What are some of the other platforms out there, and how do they differ?
There's a variety. Experiment.com is probably one of the bigger ones. It's more general science, so not necessarily medically focused, but they also do really great work and have funded. In fact, I think they just passed the $1 million mark. So, they're not a nonprofit. They do take a percentage, but they're also, scaling very quickly and provide another opportunity for researchers to gain funding. I think probably the biggest difference is that Consano was created from the patient standpoint, and really our main focus and what really drives our mission is connecting patients and families and people touched with the research that matters to them. So while clearly we're providing a funding opportunity for researchers, which is critically important as the federal budget continues to drop, we also feel like one of the biggest drivers of our site is that ongoing connection for patients. In addition, some of the academic institutions have started their own fundraising and crowdfunding sites. The Hutch Cancer Center up in Seattle is a great example. There's a researcher there who started a website called Project Violet, where he's basically kind of crowdfunding his own work, and it's a little bit different because you can go on the site and see how much he's raised, but really you kind of adopt certain components of his work. So I think, what I'm seeing in general in the industry is there's really movement for that granularity, for that control. The typical philanthropic model is you give, the organization decides, and what we're kind of shifting things to, and technology enables that, is you decide. And I think particularly for rare diseases, this is very important because, families and friends create these armies of people who just want to help, who want to support them, and by giving them this actionable way to do that, it not only encourages awareness, but it also is a tool for propelling the science forward.
So if someone is interested in using one of these sites, what should they consider? How do they know which is the right one for them?
Well, a lot of it depends on the long-term goals. Are you funding science? Are you funding medical expenses? What piece of the process are you interested in raising funds for? Clearly Consano is research-focused, so if, that's the component that you're focusing on, then clearly we would encourage anyone to give us a call. But in essence, what you want to keep in mind is that crowdfunding the success of crowdfunding is very contingent on the activity and engagement of the campaigner. So as you can imagine, for researchers, this is a new realm. They're very used to writing grants. And when you write a grant to a granting body of scientists, you're pitching yourself very differently than if you're writing a project in layman's terms to the public, to the people that are touched, by what you're doing. What we've been very pleasantly surprised to find is, although, we often have to help with iterations of the project terminology, the researchers are really excited about having this more direct connection to the people that are directly impacted by their work. So I thought, here we're creating this tool for patients, it's going to be a great connection. But the researchers actually really like that too, particularly the non-clinicians who are in the lab, who don't necessarily see, the faces of the people that are impacted. So that's been really a wonderful part of this.
Well, I want to remind our audience that they can instant message questions that they may have for our panelists, and we'll try to work them into the conversation as best we can. But let's bring Mitchell, Social Director of CureJM, into this. Annie, I want to tap your expertise on raising money through contests. I'm thinking here of things like Pepsi Refresh. Can you begin by explaining how these work, how common they are, and what kind of money organizations can raise through them?
I just wanted to explain a bit about online contests. These are usually something that's done by a business. So Pepsi Refresh, when we were involved in that was a national contest online in 2010. When the national contest by a very large business by Pepsi, they can involve a lot of money. So when we won that back in 2010, it was for $250,000. They have now since then really become quite prolific. So you have them both on the national and international scale, like Chase Community Giving, where it's open to all American 501(c)(3)s, but they will international, anybody on social media, even internationally, can vote for it, all the way down to your local credit union or bank is home, or your local car dealership is going to hold some kind of online media, social media voting contest where it's for a very small amount of money, for $1,000 or $5,000. And usually it's a kind of, the business will put as a win-win for them. They are able to promote their business, promote themselves, being able to do something very good for charity. And at the same time, it also provides some good charity that decides to become involved. It gives them some good, I'm forgetting the word, like the publicity. Sometimes it involves daily voting, whether online, just on the internet. Usually there's almost always a social media component to it. But sometimes it's just a one-time vote. And it's really, you have to understand and read the fine print to know what you're getting yourself involved in.
So give us context here. You just won $250,000, $250,000. For an organization the size of Cure JM at the time, how significant was that, and what did it take to win a contest like that?
So that's now going. At the time, that probably increased our annual income by at least annual intake of by at least a third. It was a very significant amount, but we did research beforehand before we got involved in this, and we knew that it was, since we're a very small, rare disease, we are 1 to 3 out of every 1 million children, so we are a very small nonprofit, and so we knew we were going to be up against a much larger nonprofit. And so it was going to take a lot of hours and effort and really take our entire community pulling together. It was not going to be the effort of just a few people.
So how does an organization like yours put those resources? How do you figure out what you actually need to do to be successful there?
Well, so on the slide, the real thing is preparation. You have to know in advance of preparing your resources, your marketing materials, preparing your volunteers. So having the people who are assigned for strategy, the people who are going to be working with, whether you're doing voting or you're doing crowdfunding, the people who are committed to putting in the time. Also, when you have your volunteer base, it's really, we would not have been able to do what we did if we didn't have the people who were incredibly passionate to go and use their network to make sure that they were going out to their schools, they're using all their social media, and their friends, and really working their network, as well as going beyond their networks and recruiting other people as well. And I would also say a huge thing is to never underestimate the importance of saying thank you to your volunteers and your donors. Really, we did involve in a contest that had to do with crowdfunding. And so it was through the CrowdRise Holiday Challenge. And from voting, it was that we had to we competed against other nonprofits. It was based upon who could raise the most money. And so in advance of that, before the contest ever started, we had worked with our volunteers to make sure we had people ready to go with their crowdfunding, everything that they were, make sure they have the resources in place so that once the contest started, they were ready to go.
So what will social media play in this campaign, and how did you go about organizing that?
Next slide.
Me?
Yeah. So the social media, what really works is making sure that people have things and resources that they can then use on social media. So on the previous slide, there were some resources like having pictures, cover photos, things they can use as their profile pics, and any kind of things that they could sample, emails, press releases. As rare disease families and caregivers, many times time is an issue, exhaustion can be an issue, and so we were trying to make sure that passion is usually not an issue. We're all very passionate about having better treatments or looking toward a cure for our kids. So we were trying to make sure we were putting things in people's hands where it made, took out the issue of time or, the fatigue, so that they didn't have to necessarily create these things themselves. that it made sharing on social media very easy, and therefore, then their network of friends would be able to very easily click share. We made sure to work with links to make them very easy to share, make things very convenient in whatever kind of post we use to try and make the voting as convenient as possible.
And putting these materials in putting these materials together, did you rely on in-house expertise? Did you have to go out and tap people who understood social media and marketing, or did you just learn as you went?
I think it was a combination of both. With each time we have someone who we worked with that does our website, but then we also were learning as we go. So each time we have done a voting contest, we learn a little bit more and we do it each a bit better. So definitely I say, having someone who creates stuff for you, sometimes it was, if someone has a graphic design skill with the community and was willing to do it, we did that. Sometimes it was worth it to, hire and use a webmaster or someone to do that and to pay for it. Because having the resources available meant it was easier to get the message out.
So you mentioned you made it easy for people to share, but it seems to me that it's one thing to push things out to your audience. It's another thing to get them to expand your network. What things did you do to get people engaged and expand your network?
Really helping to empower the people to be able to do their own storytelling. So nonprofits are, a big thing for nonprofits now is storytelling in social media. But we also really I really saw the importance of teaching each person to be their own story. Every person, every rare family has their own story and own journey along this way when they're fighting a rare disease. Be able to, empower people to communicate that story with others. That is what we've been trying to do and help them with in the process. And as they do that, next slide, it's just, I was a very, I think it's probably not the greatest metaphor, but it's these, you think of like raindrops and ripples on a lake, as well, one person is telling, you're rippling out and you're telling the story. People in the network, people are becoming affected. And many times in what we have seen is that it's usually not just the parents getting involved, but grandparents are passionate as well. Aunts, uncles, cousins, these are all people, friends, neighbors, teachers, people in the community who care about a child with a rare disease. They are passionate as well, and they usually come alongside, and they are also are ways in which the network become expanded. And so it's just being able to give the people the tools, each family the tools and resources to be able to communicate their rare story and become their own network. Communicate it.
You mentioned that with each campaign you learned from the previous campaign. What do you do differently today that you didn't know to do when you started this, or you didn't know not to do?
One thing I also would say too is that we also were learning from other nonprofits along the way. So that was another. I think one thing we did, and it was on the slide in case people didn't notice that, is that one, we learned to, what didn't work was flooding social media. So that was one thing, because Pepsi Refresh was a daily voting contest. So Telling people every day to vote didn't necessarily work. It didn't make people vote. So quality over quantity is something we're learning, the whole process is ability to learn to look at social media analytics. Something more often of the same thing doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be heard better. So it's very important to look at how people in your audience are responding to your social media posts. Are they responding to video more, posts more, patient education more? And trying to read and analyze that and seeing what your audience is responding to.
I want our audience that they can instant message questions they may have for our panelists, and we'll try to work them into the conversation as best we can. Annie's not the only panelist to have success with contests. Bill, founder of the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation, has had similar success with contests. But Bill, you've sworn them off, as it were. What was your experience, and why don't you pursue these today as a source of funding?
Back in 2010, we, very similar to kind of Annie's experience, we went through a number of contests and had some really, really good success, through that process, really utilizing technology and, power of kind of motivating our community to get involved. In 2010, we were place 6 in Chase Community Giving and won $125,000. And that year, we, were involved in several other contests and ended up, about $170,000 for organization. At that time, for us, that was, and still today, that was a material, amount of funds for us to put towards our program. In 2012, Chase actually invited us as part of the American Giving Awards, which was basically a 1 in 25 chance at $1 million. We actually seriously considered not even entering or being part of it just because of our experience back in 2010, but because of the fact that it was going to be on live on NBC and kind of we thought the opportunity for us to start awareness of the cause that we fight for, we thought it was definitely worth going through. Next slide, please, Katie.
Sam from our audience mentioned that her organization tried Pepsi Refresh, but it was small and they couldn't get a lot of votes. Have people been sized out of this? Do you need to have a certain critical mass to even consider participating in these types of contests?
For us, just kind of looking off this slide, the pros for us, really were as I kind of mentioned, they generated material funds for our program. So no doubt for an organization like ours, actually one of the programs funded a critical piece of research project that's now in clinical trial. So it's hard for me to look back with, in hindsight and say that, I wasn't glad that we were part of it. Obviously, it raised huge broad awareness. Millions of people were, now aware of spinal muscular atrophy that weren't before. It definitely built momentum and excitement within and outside our community. Maybe more importantly, even outside of our community. For us, that's a big part of what we do, is to try and bring others inside, connect others to get involved in what we're doing. Now it built our social media base and and wide PR that we continue to leverage today, and it definitely opened relationship opportunities that wouldn't have happened without those. For us personally, the cons, kind of looking back, were we're our organization then and even today, where really it's just my wife and I. We run the entire organization. It was extremely exhausting and emotionally draining, not only on us, but I think really on our community. We felt that kind of over time it was evolved. There was I call it the Roman battle between nonprofits and causes. You're kind of all thrown into a big mix and kind of battle it out in social media. And it just didn't, for us, it started to kind of not really feel like it was a right fit for what we were trying to do. Really, as you just touched on, Daniel, the playing field changed significantly after that first generation of contests. And, it was because of our size, but, we didn't feel like it was a, kind of worth the effort or energy to kind of go up against, some other organizations that were investing very serious dollars. For example, one organization that was involved in one of the contests we were, they posted a picture of their, basically their center center that they had put together to, hundreds of people sitting in a call center to reach out to people who had Facebook pages to vote for them. And that's just not something we were willing to do or have the resources to do, really. And really, I would say it was kind of fun on the way up and not much on the way down. We were personally involved in a contest where there were two organizations within the same disease community that were battling it out, and we didn't feel like that was something that we wanted to do.
Well, Bill, perhaps you can step back and give us a little overview of the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation, what it is, how it came about.
So, my wife and I started the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation after my daughter Gwendolyn was diagnosed with a condition called spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA. She was born perfectly healthy and diagnosed at about 6 months old. SMA is similar to ALS Lou Gehrig's, but typically in babies and young children, although it can occur in adults as well. And I'll never forget sitting in front of the diagnosing neurologist and telling my wife and I that, I'm sorry that there's nothing you can do, and take her home and love her. And that obviously left us feeling extremely defeated and hopeless. And looking back, that maybe the prognosis will ring true. There's no doubt we'll lose our daughter early to this condition. That diagnosing neurologist couldn't be any more we believe there's so much we can be doing, whether whether we have 6 days or 6 months or 6 years with our daughter. There's so much we can be doing together, and we're very fortunate. We've had the gift of time with Gwendolyn, and she's now 6.5 years old and lives a pretty normal life given her challenges. But we started the foundation basically to fight alongside Gwendolyn and to change the future of SMA.
So, how did the issue of sustainability figure into your long-term fundraising plans? I mean, contests are rather hit or miss events, I imagine. Yeah,
maybe kind of the backdrop being that it's, my wife and I running the organization. When we started, we tried everything. We would literally try every single thing to raise funds or raise awareness or build our social media base. And I think over time we determined that we needed to really focus in on things that were going to allow us to generate funds with be as efficient as possible, basically, with our efforts. So we focus mostly on our kind of or athletic events through our Team GSF. That's obviously inspiring others to get involved and run for our cause. We also focus on partnering with other organizations and corporations to garner funds for our programs. And really, recently over the last few years, our big focus has been on our merchandise, our Never Give Up brand and merchandise.
Well, your professional career put you perhaps with a better knowledge of online media and marketing than many people have. How did your business grounding shape your approach to fundraising? No doubt. My career I've spent, last 15 years in and around internet and technology startups. Next slide, please, Katie. So there's no doubt that experience kind of gave us, a template to navigate kind of the early obstacles in starting and running the organization successfully. I was more on the business side than technology. I didn't really have a lot of experience specifically in social media, and really when we started the foundation, Facebook and Twitter and that, those were kind of just starting up. It was really a lot of our early stuff was based on email and blogs. But my experience helped us kind of understand what was possible technologically, and then really it allowed us to focus on technology that fit within our overall strategy. And I think one thing we've done over the years is we've tried to really resist to doing everything. We really try and focus on things that are helping us achieve, whether it's fundraising or awareness, in the most efficient way possible. But as two people in a house, I think my experience with startup is we haven't been afraid of testing and trying new things. The nice thing with technology, specifically social media, a lot of it is free, and you can test things pretty easily, and data is pretty much almost immediately available for you to see how that's going. One thing I'd say don't rely too heavily on one avenue or any technology. For example, we started pretty much with email and blog, and
It's gone from email, blog, and Facebook to email, blog, Facebook, Twitter, to email, blog, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and it's going to continue from there. And then I'd say just important in general is be honest about your strengths and weaknesses, and know when you can do it yourself, or when you should partner, or when you shouldn't maybe do it. And then back to why we started in the first place, I think regardless of your professional experience, the biggest asset you have, and we found this for sure, is your passion for why you started in the first place and your story. And just focus on that, and I think you'll be surprised how whether it's technology companies or what have you will respond to what you're doing just because of that passion.
So organizations may have limited funds to begin. You mentioned you were essentially a two-person operation. From a business background, though, you seem to see value in investing, certainly in things like technology and on design, which may seem secondary to the mission for a lot of people. How should organizations think about where to put their dollars and where they should be more focused on spending and where they shouldn't cut corners?
I think obviously early on you need to, you have limited funds, so you need to focus on, investing in technology in the right place. I mean, not every organization, just because you build a $100,000 website, that doesn't mean you're going to raise funds. There's a lot more that goes into it than that. So, you can start your organization with, probably under $1,000 with all the technology tools you need to grow a sustainable organization. For us, we do look at our nonprofit and make decisions more from a business standpoint. So we're constantly analyzing and making cost-benefit analysis on what technologies we're using, who we're partnering with, how much is that costing us, should we build it in-house instead of partnering, should we continue on with it, is this something we really need? And I think it's important to continue to do that on an ongoing basis. And then, one, for example, like First Giving for our Team GSF fundraising platform, and it's been a good platform for us. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but we have made the kind of the analysis, should we build our own? And I think we've still netted out that we shouldn't, because it would cost us probably $1,000 to do that, and a lot of time and energy. And with the First Giving or another provider, it's probably best left to them to provide that service. You can always switch providers, although there's a cost to doing that. But we're always kind of constantly looking at what we should be doing technologically and how we do it. But we do look at it more from a business standpoint than I think most nonprofits. I think also it's important for early nonprofits to realize is there's nothing wrong with using free services. We use them. We've always used them. Just know that there's always a cost to using them, whether it's limited access to data or switching costs potentially down the line. Just realize that they're possibly there's always some sort of cost to using that service. And one other thing is, regardless of I have connections within technology, and I've definitely asked for use those to our advantage over the years. But when you're starting out, you know somebody who knows somebody who creates websites or does design work or what have you, and be relentless in asking for favors along those lines.
So, as someone from the business world, should organizations start with a business plan before going out and raising funds?
Absolutely would encourage people to. I mean, we definitely did. We didn't start our organization lightly. We didn't go into our disease community. Maybe is different from some of the other rare communities. There are a couple of large organizations. There's a very rich research community. So we wanted to make sure if we were starting something, it was going to be additive to what was already there. And so, just like if we were starting a new business, you would want to do a business plan and know what you're getting into. We took the time to, we wrote about a 20-page business plan, not a plan specifically for the foundation, to make sure that we, had the tools. We got the tools in the right place, and we were fitting ourselves into a community that was already, that was already there, and that we were going to actually add to that. So I'll tell you, we had a lot of outreach from newly diagnosed families or what have you, and saying, hey, we were just diagnosed, I want to start a nonprofit. How do you do it? And I think that's wonderful. but we're always shocked at how many people who got that way have never actually even done a fundraiser. People don't understand that starting a nonprofit's one thing, but constantly fundraising to keep that, that nonprofit going is a big undertaking, specifically for those who are, already with challenges of a rare disease diagnosis.
I don't want to suggest anyone's child is a brand, but organizations have brands and retailers have brands. How important is it for an organization seeking to raise money to understand and define their brand?
We don't have a brand or design background, but I guess if you kind of look back at what we've done, we've always had a design and brand element to what we've done. But really, it's evolved organically over time, and it started kind of just sharing Gwendolyn's story and people, resonating with people for some reason, and then us, really becoming inspired by others that we met in the community and sharing those stories. And so at this slide, you can see these are a lot of, a bunch of the different things we've done over the years, and there's some consistency there, but you can see it's kind of evolved over time. From kind of our first effort, which was our petition that was, 100,000 plus signatures for piece of legislation, to where we are kind of today, which is really our Never Give Up branding, which really resonates not only within the SMA community and people going through the challenges of suffering, but I think even more importantly for us as an organization is it resonates with pretty much almost anyone who's going through their own challenges, and that's where next slide please, Katie. Our brand has really, just kind of evolved over time organically. And, now today, really going back to the sustainability piece, for us now the brand kind of resonates not only with what we do in our athletics, not only with what every single person who's impacted by this disease does on a daily basis, whether people have their children or are battling it, but it also resonates with others, and it's allowed us to reach new demographics outside of our community and bring them into, to what we're trying to do as an organization, and hopefully get involved and do more in the future.
A reminder our audience that they can instant message questions they may have for our panelists, and we'll work them into our conversation as best we can. April from the audience wants to know how to find out about these contests, and I'll throw that open to any of our panelists. A central way to find out? Do you just search them out? Try this one.
Well, I think that for me, a lot of this, I haven't actually done any contests via Insano, but I know what I found to be a huge resource for finding out information is actually Twitter, and kind of knowing the organizations to follow that are in the know. So that would be my 2 cents.
No, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I meant to ask Annie that.
No worries.
Annie?
Sometimes we are sent information from members of our community. That's where we find out information. I am not aware of any kind of central location on the internet. Usually each individual business is advertising it on their own. So I'm not aware of any kind of central location.
Right. So there's no shortage of social media platforms today. Most small organizations seeking to raise money for rare disease have limited resources and may be new to the many different alternatives they have. How should they prioritize the most appropriate channels for them to use?
I would, from our standpoint, I think it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. I think certain organizations or strategies lend themselves to certain mediums, and so not that you don't need to be doing everything, but if you happen to be using imagery, to kind of spread your story, obviously Instagram would be a great place for that. I personally think, like today, I think everybody should have a Facebook page, but potentially Twitter is not something for you if you're just going to use it to spread links or what have you. I don't think that you necessarily need to be doing that type of thing. So it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish and, how you're using kind of, tools, at your disposal to spread your message.
Also, that there are some very cool tools that can integrate a lot of the social media platforms so that you can post one thing and it goes out on the various channels, and then you can do a little kind of testing yourself to see, which channels seem to be working with the messages that you're sending out, where is your audience most engaged. So I think some of that is just trial and error and learning what works best for your goals, as Bill was mentioning.
So to what extent do people have to for their message to Medium? What works on what platform? Will it work on a different platform, or do you have to do something differently on Twitter than you do on Facebook than you do on Instagram?
I think Bill, go ahead.
I can tell you that, our experience is that the different mediums are absolutely different messaging on the different platforms. So we use completely different messaging on Facebook at different times than we do on email or Twitter or our blog or Instagram. And the nice thing about technology, though, is that you can test this. You can test it very easily, and data is immediate. So, you can try something in the morning on Facebook with a big long post and and an image, and maybe try something the next day at the same time with just a link and see how your community interacts.
So, question from the audience.
I would also say I would also not discount Twitter, because Twitter is really highly used by urban environments and minority groups, and so that can more than it is with Facebook. And so we also use Twitter to connect with medical professionals and other nonprofits. So it's really, like Bill was saying before, you look at what you're going to be utilizing each one for. We also use LinkedIn for connecting. We have a group on LinkedIn, and that's where we end up connecting. Our dads end up connecting a lot with one another because, for instance, a lot of our fathers tend not to use Facebook. They tend to use LinkedIn, and so it gives them a chance to be able to connect with one another or other professionals that are volunteers. They can connect with one another that way, and it also gives us presence there.
So it was mentioned earlier that there are tools to integrate social media platforms. If any of you have any recommendations for that, or if you have experience using any of these tools.
I use Hootsuite regularly. That's the one that was kind of recommended to me.
And Hootsuite do for you, for people who may not be familiar with it?
Hootsuite's basically like a big dashboard that shows, kind of all of your social media accounts really in one place. So, for instance, I have there's a Consano Twitter account, but I also have my own Twitter account, so I can kind of follow all of those things at once. And you post, and the nice thing about Hootsuite is you might be posting thinking about Facebook, but it will condense it down to the 140 characters necessary if you choose to post it on Twitter as well. So it's kind of an all-in-one system and an easier way to monitor your interactions on social media.
So another audience question from Carrie is, are there any good websites or Facebook pages that anyone could recommend to help educate people who are new to social media about up to speed on it?
Well, social media is a great way. They have a lot of short articles that will help you learn about social media and all of the different platforms. So
we talked a little about branding, but how important is consistency and brand identity, as it were, when you're using social media?
For us at Consano, given we're a newer organization, people aren't necessarily familiar with the crowdfunding or the crowdfunding for medical research. For us, it's huge because a consistent brand equates to credibility, and people then know what your message is, they know what your mission is, they know what your intent is, and then they trust it. So I would say it's very important in terms of the consistent message. And really, I mean, that should be kind of inherent in the intent of the organization or your mission.
So another question from the audience. This one's from Vanessa. Have any of you put any strategies to counteract things Facebook may be doing to change the way their algorithms work and limit post availability? And are any of you using paid posts or sponsored posts and having any success with that?
What we found is that photos tend to do better in our algorithms. So if we have a link, we will usually post a photo and the text will include the link rather than just having a text with the link. That photos or videos tend to perform better. However, it was only during the most recent crowdfunding contest that we had that we used any kind of sponsored post. I think our entire budget was about $75. We don't use sponsored posts, that at all.
I agree with Annie on the images. We use imagery very heavily anyway, so I think it lends itself well to our organization and what we do. But we do use and we do see much better action with images and the links kind of secondary to the image rather than just posting a link directly. We have used sponsored posts. I mean, if you think of our merchandise, we obviously it kind of lends itself a little bit better to to doing those types of things, and it's been pretty successful for us. So there's been a really good return on those types of posts for us. And sometimes we will boost posts with very small amounts of money if it's just as we would with to post a press release. We kind of look at it the same way, trying to reach new demographics, and but nothing big. They're small, but it does help.
All of you are trying to build a constituency and energize people around your cause and raise money. How do you separate yourself from the others trying to do the same thing online so it doesn't all sound like noise?
I think, for us, I'll just speak, we've just tried to kind of we don't really try and do things differently to negate what else other people are doing. I think we just try to stay, kind of, what motivates and inspires us. And, over the years, it's inspired others to get involved. And so we kind of try and focus on positivity and staying focused on being, motivating others to get involved in our cause. And that's worked well for worked well for us.
I would. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I echo what Bill says. We just focus on our message, and I think it's, especially with rare diseases, each person's story is unique. Each community is quite unique. So juvenile myositis community, people are very passionate about a cure for juvenile myositis, and we want a cure for all rare diseases, but, our focus is juvenile myositis and share best practices because we want a cure for all rare diseases, and we work toward that goal. But, it's usually people being and expanding the networks within their community, when their families and their schools for that goal. And so we usually don't find necessarily that there's the competition necessary, it's focusing our message and the positivity behind it.
I would just also to build on what both Bill and Annie said, I think that strong storytelling and partnerships and collaboration really for us, again, we're much more broad in that we include research from a variety of different areas, but I think the universal thing that we found is that, having a rare disease, having, cancer, or being a caregiver for someone with a rare disease can be very isolating, and, to hear someone else tell their story really brings that piece of the idea that you're not alone. So I think that for us, it's very much, we hope that Consano funds great research, but we also hope that it provides another platform for those stories to be shared and for us to help other organizations that are doing good work and really, exactly to Bill and Annie's point, build up the community rather than, create a fragmented competition.
We've talked a lot about what people should do. Dean asking, what's the one thing you've learned not to do from your experience? Why don't you begin, Molly?
Gosh, what not to do? Well, as Bill was mentioning earlier, we've built Consano very much as a business. We're kind of a tech healthcare startup. So life as an entrepreneur or as the, founder of an organization is full of ups and downs. I would say, kind of flipping that question a little bit, I think the thing that I would do more of is really leverage the expertise of my personal network. I mean, I think, you get in this, you're passionate, you have a reason for doing it, and you just want to get it done. And I think that, really utilizing the tools that others bring to the table is really crucial. And
how about you? What's the one you've learned?
What to do? I'm the social media director, so I've definitely learned along the way a lot about the analytics, looking at the audience and the time, looking at the time of each thing, of each platform. For instance, for our community, we have lots of working families, and so people you get on Facebook until the evening. That was one little thing, but it just meant a lot more engagement if I scheduled a post till 6 o'clock after everyone had dinner, instead of 9 o'clock in the morning. So, it's not one big thing, but it's a lot of those, looking at that kind of data of take the time to step and sort of analyze and looking at what works and what doesn't.
Bill, you.
That's an important thing.
I would say definitely don't try and do everything. And really focus on your strengths and know your strengths and be completely open to partnering on many aspects that don't necessarily align, or to supplement what your strengths are. I think a lot of organizations try to do kind of too many things, and you really should, in my opinion, focus on what you're really good at and be open to partnering on pieces that you may need help on.
Understand that a replay of the webinar will be available by the end of the week and on the Global Genes site. There'll also be an email going out to people who have joined us today to participate and listen in. I want to thank our panelists for sharing their insights today. Molly Lindquist, founder and CEO of Consano, and Mitchell, social media director of the Cure JM Foundation, and Bill Strong, founder of the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation. I want to thank today's sponsors, Zoma, Shire, Genzyme, and Alexion for their support for the webinar, and the staff of Global Genes and Castro for her great work putting together and coordinating this program. On behalf of Global Genes, I'm Daniel Levine. Thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. I encourage you to look at the webinars and resources on the Global Genes website.